this is what I want to talk about. There's no bells and whistles on this presentation because I put it together rather hastily, but it's going to be just mainly talking points. My goal is to have as much interaction as everybody is comfortable with. But this is going to be, it's going to maybe test people's comfort limits. I'm not going to, go into like explicit details or anything, but we're talking about sex, and everybody has a different level of comfort with this. We've been kind of talking about this off and on in our group for the last several weeks. But I do in my other job. So I'm part time here at ACA, and I also work for a company that's based in Oakland called Psychological Assessment Incorporated. That's a forensic psychology firm. So uh, that means that they have a program for registered sex offenders. They have a program that's dedicated to working with adults and youths with developmental neurocognitive disabilities that need help learning and exhibiting healthy sexual behaviors. Usually they've been referred for unhealthy sexual behaviors. Um, and I also do a bunch of competency restoration and assessment and that kind of stuff too. So uh, I've worked for them for almost 3 years, and I've worked with a lot of adults in different disabled states that are dealing with how to navigate sexual behaviors. And so I think this is something that isn't really talked about a lot. At least that's my observation. And I don't know if how much work have you guys done around this? I can't see anybody, by the way, so you're gonna have to speak up.
Whoops. I haven't had any formal training in this. I've had several clients where teaching them appropriate behavior became part of the work because of
Mm,
some disability they had cognitively.
hmm.
So it's more by the seat of my pants.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people that aren't like, if this isn't your bread and butter, like that's usually the way you're going to go about it. I think this isn't something that's really, I didn't encounter any programs in grad school that taught about this other than, you know, phases of development, life cycle, this kind of thing. Um, but we're talking about the adults that are receiving the interventions as well as their families, because a lot of the time they have some kind of support network that is helping them, whether it's their family that they're living with or their family that's directly involved in their care and maybe they're living in a group home, or there are some people that I work with that don't have any family and they're wards of the state. And basically, Alta Regional Center, I don't know if you guys are familiar with Alta. Alta Regional Center is basically like the intermediary that's making referrals for these kinds of programs. And there's not a whole lot of programs out there. Um, a lot of this, a lot of the stuff happens in the school system. You technically age out of the public school system at 22. That is the legal cap, I believe. That's what my wife works in the school district, and that's when people stop receiving school services. So I just did an intake with a client at my other place recently where um, he kept getting held back, and he was in special ed for years until they kicked him out. I think he was 20, and then he had to go through like an adult education program. And he made it, but it's always like this long, arduous journey, and stuff like how do you have a healthy relationship, or how do you go about having sex, depending on your level of ableness, isn't it's never talked about. So that's what I want to talk about today.
Great.
you may never get a client like this, or you may get a referral tomorrow like this. It's still good to kind of have this knowledge in your back pocket. And I will also be giving you guys a couple of resources at the end, um, that are is I've found helpful in working with adults, kind of no matter where they're at, actually developmentally. So here are my objectives. I just want the whole goal of this is to normalize sexuality, um, place importance on autonomy and consent, and provide some inclusive definitions of sexual wellness. Um, this isn't necessarily, there's no order to this at all when you're working with a client, but these are like the three big domains that I see are important. What other objectives would you have for a client in this situation? Like, let's say they're conserved and their parents are coming to you, which I've seen a lot of. What other objectives might you add to this?
Hmm.
Because you're probably speaking to the client and their care team, whether it's their parents or their group home staff. Either one presents unique barriers.
So
I,
these three would be being addressed not only with client, but with their support team.
100%.
Yeah. Okay.
I have a question
Yeah.
around their ability as well.
Yeah.
Only like yes, they are sexually developed, but I'm talking in more so the emotional ability to comprehend, understand, more so consequences of right than
Mhm.
any.
So I would absolutely add that objective. Assessing their ability to comprehend the emotional impact or the emotional effects of sexuality, and supporting whatever their level of ability is. Um, some of these folks may never have sex, but that doesn't mean that they don't have sexual feelings and thoughts. And that doesn't mean that they can't engage in self pleasure, even, depending on their level of ability. Um, I haven't worked with clients that are so disabled that they can't do that. That's a whole nother ballgame. I mean, there are people that are they're gravely disabled and they don't have full control over their arms and legs, right? And that's going to look very different. Therapy is going to look very different for those kinds of clients. Um, I'm not necessarily going to be focused on that part of it. I can do another presentation about that if you like down the road. I hope that answers your
Good
question.
addition, Anessa.
Okay. So some common barriers. There's limited education out there. Um, there's a lot of stigma and shame from both sides. There's communication challenges. There are absolutely adults with autism that are nonverbal that need a healthy outlet for sexual expression. Um, and there's sensory, there's cognitive, there's physical limitations, right? So these are the barriers that are going to be present if you get a client like this. Um, the limited education piece, I feel, is a really big one because this population, this group of people, is really dependent on others most of the time. And um, I don't know how much interaction you've had with school systems or group homes, but the topic of sex is often shied away from or ignored. And um, it's only recently where I've been learning about extra effort being made by the school districts to have inclusive language and education for people with disabilities beyond um, beyond like quote unquote common disabilities like being hearing impaired or visually impaired, or um, being like in a wheelchair, for instance. Um, there's limited educational resources for people that are uh, cognitively impaired, and you don't really see it in schools. I mean, it's more of like a general education for quote unquote normal kids, right, or average adults. So we're not talking about the average adults or the average kids. Oops, I went too far. Okay. So some of the foundational concepts that I work with my adult clients is consent and body autonomy, safety, and respect and boundaries. Consent's a big one. Um, and that's often like the biggest hurdle in the beginning of treatment is getting them to understand what consent is and how to navigate it. A lot of the clients that I receive are acting on impulse, and they don't know how to ask for consent. And conceptualizing an abstract concept is quite difficult sometimes. So you got to change the language. You got to change the approach about how you're addressing this. Um, I have so one of the resources that I'm going to give you, and I'll put it in the drive too, or the Dropbox drive, is something called Relationships Decoded. I don't know if anyone's ever used this or heard of this, but it utilizes images of people interacting to demonstrate how to identify if somebody is okay with what you're doing, interested in being closer to you, at varying levels of intimacy, from just sitting on a park bench to kissing. So, using images like that in conjunction with talking about consent, and I mean, I've spent a couple months with the client working on the idea of consent to the point where they can define it and talk about how they can request consent and what does it look like and that kind of thing. So you can do it. It's going to be beyond talking a lot of the time. But when you look
A
up,
minute.
sorry,
Uh,
question.
uh, uh, are you going to come back to body autonomy and safety and respect for boundaries?
So yeah, I'll talk a little bit about that. I focused more on just for the timing's sake, but yeah, body autonomy. It's like you there has to be a focus on people's right to their own body and people's right to express themselves in a safe way and in a respectful way and in a way that doesn't violate boundaries of others or themselves, right?
Okay.
This is difficult when you're working with somebody that's conserved, for instance, because they don't have a lot of autonomy. They're kind of beholden to whoever is working in their best interests. Sometimes that's the state, unfortunately. And sometimes that's the parents. I had a client for a couple of years who his parents referred him. He was conserved. Parents were taking care of him, but he was living in a group home. This is an adult in his 20s. Um, he was able to hold a job part time. He couldn't drive. And I would say, emotionally and cognitively, he was working at like an elementary school level. And uh, if you want to talk about barriers, this was a significant one. The parents were completely against any kind of sexual expression, and they confronted it from a like fundamentalist Christian lens. I'm not going to talk any kind of negativity about religion or the church. And this, they kind of, they were working against what they sent the client to therapy for, if that makes sense. So a big point of contention is pornography a lot of the time. These parents were completely against pornography. He's a 25-year-old adult, right? Legally, he can watch pornography. But again, he's conserved, right? So any attempt at self-pleasure, whether it was safe or not, there were some unsafe things he was doing. Um, were squashed. So taking away computer, taking away phone. They even took the door off of his bedroom, so he really had no private space, and it was a really big thing. So um, body autonomy and educating not only the client but their families in the case that I'm talking about, hey, he needs to be able to express himself with his body safely, but also privately, and working with them to, at minimum, put the door back on the hinges. Um, Eventually, believe it or not, we got to a point with these parents where they, I think the dad took him to an adult store and bought him some pornography to watch by himself in his room, and that was a pretty big step for in terms of safe sexuality. This person was harming themselves, trying to pleasure themselves, and so there was a lot of education on like, hey, we don't put things in there, especially sharp things. I won't go into details about that, but it was quite dangerous. Um, but I hope that answers the question about body autonomy. This is going to be an ever evolving topic with each client too. What
Yes.
can they do with their body and what is safe to do with their body? Um, how much control do they have of their body? That kind of thing.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. But yeah, safety, respect, boundaries. That's you always want to make sure whatever they're doing is safe. So I hope you guys aren't squeamish. I will briefly mention an instance. I had a client that had discovered the uh, uh, the fetish called sounding. Does anybody know what this is?
No, I'm a ignorant white guy.
I'm going to take that as a no. Okay. Uh, Sounding is when a man uh, inserts an object as a small cylindrical object into his urethra, and as far as comfortably it will go for pleasure. There's a unique little niche community out there that this is something that they enjoy. There are companies that make sounding rods of varying sizes that you can do, but you can really hurt yourself doing this kind of thing if you don't know what you're doing. And um, it took a lot of very slow education. Yeah, Darren, immediately hand goes up.
I'm sorry. Did you just use the word comfortably and inserting something into your urethra in the same sentence?
Yes, the whole idea is that um, you get one of these sounding rods and you stick it into your penis, and so for some people this feels good.
Okay. I've
Yeah,
learned something new today.
yeah. Uh, I from what I understand, you need to be erect for this to happen, but that it is a thing. If you're feeling brave, you can find some videos on it. I wouldn't though, just unless you're, like I said, unless you're feeling brave. But yeah, it's a thing. So this person had discovered that, and they thought, hey, that sounds like something that I would like to do. Unfortunately, they didn't know what they were doing. They felt like they would get in trouble, so they didn't tell anybody what they were doing, and they injured they injured themselves and needed medical attention. They were fine, but um, yeah, it's the parents were obviously horrified, and it took a lot of therapy sessions to increase their comfort level with like, hey, look, they're going to keep doing this, so abstinence. So here's another foundational concept: abstinence isn't wholly successful. It doesn't work. Telling people not to have sex or not to masturbate is never going to work for the most part. I don't like using extremes. Well, so I'll say it's probably not going to work. So the best case is to educate. You do the same thing in schools with teenagers. They're gonna find ways to have sex. So the best thing to do is to educate them on how to do it safely and prevent unwanted pregnancies and stuff like this. It's the same thing with a disabled adult that's into sounding. They're gonna figure it out. I don't, you don't want them to use a Phillips head screwdriver, so you might as well help them find safe ways to do it. And that's probably going to also include, in this case, it did include a consultation with a physician about how to go about this. In this case, oh man, I couldn't have asked for a better doctor to talk to this guy about it because he was really nice and informative, and like you could tell that he truly cared about this client and presented a lot of images and turned out to be a really good thing. But yeah, whatever they're going to do, it's got to be safe. So, does that answer your question?
Uh,
I'm gonna move on a little bit. Okay.
yeah, yeah, please do. Yeah.
All right. So I just, if you look up what consent, if you just ask, what's the definition of consent? Um, you'll get a you'll get something like this. So consent must be freely given without any form of pressure or force, manipulation, or intimidation. It has to be based on clear communication with an affirmative agreement. Most people would say, well, yeah, you have to have an enthusiastic yes, a clear yes, rather than the absence of a no. That's something that is a nuance that some folks have a very difficult time understanding. Um, just because they don't say no doesn't mean the answer is not no. Consent cannot be assumed based on previous relationships or silence. It can be withdrawn at any time as long as the decision is clearly communicated. I don't, you know what? I don't know. I don't like that. I pulled that. I pulled this definition, this fourth one, from a document that I was using for my other job. I'm just going to say it can be withdrawn or modified at any time. There's no stipulation to that. And consent can only be given by someone with the capacity to make the decision. This is a big one. If we're working with a disabled adult, how the hell do you gauge whether or not they can make the decision? Now, obviously, not being on drugs or alcohol or something else, yes, that's a given, right? Somebody who's drunk can't give consent because they're not their mind has been altered. But somebody that's operating at like an 8-year-old level, can they? But let's say that they're 25. Do they have the capacity to make the decision? I would say yes, unless but they have to understand the four other parts of this. They have to be able to just talk about it, describe it, and give examples of how they might use it. And that's how I do it with the adults that I work with. If you can define it to me, if you can give me examples, and you can hold a conversation with it about it with me, then I think that that shows that you have the capacity to make the decision.
Hmm.
Anybody disagree with that? It's real sticky. No pun intended. Sorry about that one. Okay. So when I'm talking about healthy sexual expression with these clients, you always want to identify safe private spaces for this. Uh, you want to make sure that they're using appropriate materials. I already gave you my example of the sounding rod guy, where he was using a Phillips head screwdriver. That's an inappropriate material. Um, uh, but that can also be stuff like child pornography. I've had a couple clients in the past that wound up getting in trouble legally because they were just kind of going off of instinct and looking around on the internet and found themselves looking at things that were illegal. Now, I don't know how the hell they got there, but they did. And so educating them on like, hey, you can look at pornography, but like we got to talk about what kind of pornography is okay and what's not okay. That's usually a pretty simple conversation. I haven't really had too much difficulty with that of like, verifying age and making sure that if you're looking at something like that, there's always that disclaimer at the beginning that says all these actors are 18 or older and consenting adults and that kind of thing. Yeah, what's up there?
So I have a question for you because you have experience in this, and
Yeah.
this seems. Oh, sorry, I'll lower my hand. This seems very, man, tumultuous to navigate.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
And so I guess I have a couple questions. One, do you tend to see people with, I mean, if I think it's fair to say diminished capacity, right? Is it do you see folks with diminished capacity leaning more towards the extreme, right? The
No, I don't.
okay.
I the what I see the most is they go to Google and they type stuff that they want to see. So I'll ask them like, hey, so what are you looking for when you go on the internet? What do you look for? I just go to Google and I type sex. Well, I go and do that, and you're going to find all kinds of stuff, right?
Mhm.
Not necessarily pornography either, but probably pornography right away. And very rarely are they being very specific with what they want, unless they're somebody, let's say, with borderline intellectual disability or somebody that's just on the low end of um, like what am I trying to say? Just on the low end of a cognitive disability. Like they're a functional adult, but they're just like a little slow, right? Um, I I I don't see people in that category going towards the extreme very often, unless they have a true paraphilia. Then that's a different story. But those are very rare, from my experience. The people that are for extreme things are uh, neurotypical adults. From what I work with, these are the registered sex offenders that are neurotypical men that look for extreme stuff when they go out of their way to find
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah,
it.
I
Yeah.
mean this is a super interesting topic, obviously.
Oh
So
yeah. I'm kind of low key like working on a little bit of a series of educational talks to do uh, with schools about ways that the guys that I just mentioned, the neurotypical, sex offender population, how they're going about um, approaching their victims and how they're so educating teachers, school psychologists, parents about how this stuff is happening and what to look out for. Um, and
Grooming behaviors.
Yeah, somewhat, yeah, but also like how to know if your kid is safe playing um, video games, public space video games.
God, yeah, I know what Rob is. What is, I can never pronounce it.
Oh
Roblox.
yeah, Roblox, that's a big one. Yeah,
That's Roblox
Fortnite.
is the yeah, Roblox is the number one platform for child predators right now.
Yep, 100%. You very rarely see somebody. So let me rephrase. Uh, I in my experience very rarely seen a disabled adult um, do those kinds of things.
So would you say that it's more their diminished capacity is more causing issues in navigating the legal versus the legal or the right versus wrong
Both.
more along like the age line or the act line.
Um, Both.
Okay.
Yeah. Uh, I've got a client right now that's on the autism spectrum, and um, he he likes thinking about young girls, but he's never acted on that. But he really like toes the line about like what kind of things that he wants to look at when he's thinking about this kind of thing. And he's almost gotten in trouble a couple times, and it's so I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah,
Uh,
it's just I'm trying to wrap my head around, and this is a you question again, like how do you navigate that? How do you navigate that and teach that moral absolutism, that right versus wrong in the context of somebody with diminished capacity that doesn't quite see that for themselves? You know what I mean?
you mean right versus wrong in terms of like you can only look at stuff that is 18 or older?
Yeah.
I mean, you have to teach them to verify it as best they can. In terms of, and there's going to be instances, and like the example that I gave, where their parents or caregivers take them to a store and buy pornography that's clearly adults.
And we're not talking moralistically here. This is pretty
This is legal.
simple, straightforward. If
Yeah.
you do this, you will go to jail.
Yes. Yeah.
Uh, and so therefore, you don't want to go to jail, do you? No. Well, then let's talk about how you don't go to jail.
Right. Right. Yeah. Good clarification. We're not necessarily talking about morals, but we also kind of are, right? Because we're talking about good touch and bad touch. We're talking about
Yeah.
we are talking about we're not necessarily talking about right and wrong. We're talking about appropriate versus inappropriate, legal versus illegal. It's not my
And our
place to
effect on
say,
other people.
yeah, it's not my place to say, putting things in your penis for sexual pleasure is wrong, dude. It's not my place. As long as they're doing it safely and appropriately, okay, have at it. That's an example of masturbation as a healthy sex self exploration. That can take a lot of forms. So we talk a lot about boundary skills. What is personal space? What are emotional boundaries? Digital boundaries? That's even more important now. Um, Facebook chat, anything with a chat function. Oh man, that is just a minefield for an adult with disabilities. A lot of the times they're looking for a friend, and a lot of the times they get taken advantage of.
Yep.
So that's super important to navigate with them too. I know we're kind of out of time.
Yeah.
I
What do you think you want to do? Do you have enough that we should postpone it to another time, or what?
I have a lot of slides after this. I really wanted to go over the resources that I have available. So I can pause it here and we can
Let's pause
complete it
it
next time.
here and put you on the schedule sometime in the new year.
Okay.
'Cause this is really important stuff and uh, something that I would add. I had a client, um, well, I'll save it for when we come back. Um,
Okay.
so, Price, thank you.
Yeah.